Visual novels. Japanese visual novels. What are they? Visual novels are basically, as they sound, novels that have some form of interactivity to them. They're most often found in Japan, and sometimes they get popular enough to where anime adaptations get made out of them. Being someone who loves both reading and video games, it seems like the perfect blend of the two, and so why not tackle a visual novel and give it a shot? And so, what visual novel did I choose to break my so-called visual novel virginity or pop my animated cherry? That would be
Danganronpa.
So, what did I think about it? And am I now an advocate for the genre? Well, I don't know. To be honest with you, it was interesting, it was fun, but I wouldn't necessarily say I'm craving the medium now and wanting to see what it really has to offer. However, what it did do for me was open my eyes up to the genre, to the point where if I hear about some insane visual novel in the future, I might actually consider picking up and seeing how it is, which honestly is a good thing overall. Now, of course, a lot of people may think that this is not a W for the genre, but honestly, instead of turning someone off, piquing their interest and making them want to consider looking into more is actually a good thing when it comes to introducing someone to a new genre of video games. So I actually consider this a great result when it comes to my first visual novel. So what were some of my pros and cons when it came to my first experience? I'm going to be tackling this from the perspective of the visual novel that I played personally and how it affected me. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. So to start off with a pro, that would be the immersion that the game brought overall. As far as Danganronpa goes, I instantly picked up on the premise and the mood that they were going for, and honestly, I was all in. Let's go solve the mystery surrounding the school that's kidnapping a bunch of kids, holding them hostage, and forcing them to play a death game. Which, in this death game, the winner is basically whoever's able to get away with murder without being caught. Honestly, it's a great concept from the get-go. It basically turned into a detective show where you have to solve the murder every week, pick up on certain clues, and find out who done it. Now, in the beginning of the game, a lot of the kids were taking the high road of let's not murder anyone at all, let's work together and try to figure out the mystery of what's going on and escape this place that we're being currently held hostage in. And due to this is where our big bad Monokuma comes in and basically gives them a motive each day to force them to murder. Whether it's a motive or a bribe, he's trying to get them to go through with the murder so that it isn't stagnant and the death game is entertaining. The thing I was most surprised, honestly, when it came to all of this was how much I actually enjoyed all of this. Reason being, I actually hate detective TV shows and like the cop genre as a whole. So the fact that they got me interested in a game where I basically have to be a detective was a plus from the beginning. When it came to a lot of the killings, some of the killings were very complex, very thorough, and very interesting to investigate and try to figure out what's going on, while a few of the other ones were plain as day and you kind of knew who it was right away. But overall, there was a good variety when it came to a lot of the killings. However, that being said, I will say that a downside of the story at some points was the scenarios you were dealing with. Some of them were a bit contrived or, let's say, extremely convenient. Either things would happen with no explanation or things would happen that we had no prior knowledge of and were never presented to us, or certain conventions were broken for the sake of the story sometimes, which were some of the more annoying cases when it came to it. Overall though, most of the stories and the murders were very intriguing and kept me going and kept me interested in the game. Now, as we know, it's a very interesting concept, but how is the gameplay overall of this visual novel? Overall, it was basically non-existent for the most part when it came to gameplay. And in the few spots that there were gameplay, sometimes it was more frustrating than it needed to be honest. Now, of course, when it comes to visual novels, gameplay is never the main thing, and the story is what takes the main precedence. When it comes to Danganronpa, a lot of the gameplay is just point and click, which is totally fine. It does its job. I'm not coming into this game expecting it to be Dark Souls or Call of Duty. However, when it came to gameplay, I did have a few frustrations, mostly in that of the trial sequences. Let's take a step back though before we go there. Let's first talk about the structure of the game itself, and then we could get into some of my gripes with the trial sequence. So structure-wise, it's pretty straightforward for the most part. You start each chapter with a new area that you can explore. You explore the area, then at the end of your day, you talk to all your classmates about your discoveries and what you found in these new areas. Then the next day comes, Monokuma gives everyone like a motive or a bribe and tries to motivate people to commit murder. After that, you go through a few more days where you spend time with your classmates and you bond with them, trying to get to know them. Then, all of a sudden, the murder happens. Once the murder occurs, then you enter the investigation stage. In this stage, you'll spend your time collecting all the evidence that you need. And after collecting evidence, you then start the trial phase, and then at the end of the trial, you vote out whoever is guilty. Pretty simple and straightforward for the most part. In terms of the first part, you basically explore, learn things about your environment, and this can be used later in terms of collecting evidence to see what has changed when a murder takes place and what's missing. On the normal days before the murder, you spend time with your classmates, and this is where you could actually get skills and flesh out the story overall and grow a bond with your classmates. And then in the pre-trial phase after the murder, this is where you'll then investigate these environments that you went to and see how they changed and how the murder affected anything, and collect all your evidence. Finally, the trial phase, where everything you collected comes into place. This brings me to my main complaint about the game. I found that oftentimes when you need to make an objection, the game wants you to do it in a very specific way, and there was a lack of choice when it came to this. For example, sometimes they want you to steal a phrase from what someone said and use it against another person. However, sometimes you feel the bullet that you have is already sufficient enough to be used. And so this kind of causes some confusion on what you're supposed to do in the trial. This lack of choosable options in the trial is probably the biggest flaw with the game, I would say. I feel as though they would have benefited from having multiple branching paths, ones that you can choose as long as you still come to the same conclusion on who the killer was, because oftentimes who the killer is kind of blatant, and you'll just end up sitting there for 2 hours straight listening to meaningless dialogue and being forced to do these quick time events when really it's kind of self-explanatory, and the game just wants you to experience the trial in a specific way instead of necessarily choosing how you want to do the trial and letting you make the mistakes you want to make. Outside of that though, there's no major complaints when it comes to the trials themselves. My only other complaint, which is more due to my expectations of visual novels, is the lack of choice. I think this is more of an issue in regards to Danganronpa versus other visual novels. I would have enjoyed if the people you choose to spend time with affected who the murderer killed, basically. That, or at least provide us with multiple endings and branching paths we could take. I would just enjoy having a little bit more choice to feel like my decisions are actually making an impact, if that makes sense. Overall though, I don't really want to harp on the negatives because I did enjoy the game and what it had to offer. Another positive would be in the characters themselves. Yes, some of the characters are archetypes and tropes, but they all had decent enough backstories and they all did their jobs well enough to where they were sufficient in the roles they were playing. And even though some of them were archetypes, it never really took you out of the scenario. The last complaint I would have though is just the ending. I felt as though it could have been explained better overall. It just kind of seemed cheesy to me where the world and the villain are in shambles because the villain just wanted to bring despair to everyone with no particular cause. It was a simple hope versus despair storyline, and I think if they made the ending scenario or explanation more interesting or added a bit more nuance, it would have been a bit more enjoyable for me at least. I don't really want to go into more details about the ending because I don't want to spoil it for anyone watching, and so I'll go ahead and just leave that there. Overall though, I still enjoyed Danganronpa. I think it was a good choice to get me into visual novels with. It certainly piqued my interest on the medium and has me wondering what it has to offer. Please let me know though, what's the best visual novel you've ever played? Is there a certain visual novel I should check out? Are there any that like stand above the rest? Not only that, if you played Danganronpa, what did you think about it as well? Thank you for watching though. If you could leave a like and subscribe, that'd be greatly appreciated. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day today. I appreciate your time. Bye bye.